auditsoftware.net in delivering training series focusing on audit software. We're really glad you could join us today. I'll be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm the founder of AuditNet with a background as a Chief Audit Executive, Internet for Auditors pioneer, and an auditor who believes and promotes between AuditNet and auditsoftware.net in delivering training series focusing on audit software. We're really glad you could join us today. I'll be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm the founder of AuditNet with a background as a Chief Audit Executive, Internet for Auditors pioneer, and an auditor who believes and promotes the use of technology for audit. The next slide provides a little bit of information about AuditNet. I won't go over the details of that. However, before we proceed to today's material and introducing our presenter, Rich Lanza, I'd like to go through a few important housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. That'll be sent out approximately 5 to 7 business days after we finish the webinar, and that'll be sent via an email. NASBA rules do require us to ask polling questions during the webinar, and CPs between AuditNet and auditsoftware.net in delivering training series focusing on audit software. We're really glad you could join us today. I'll be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm the founder of AuditNet with a background as a Chief Audit Executive, Internet for Auditors pioneer, and an auditor who believes and promotes the use of technology for audit. The next slide provides a little bit of information about AuditNet. I won't go over the details of that. However, before we proceed to today's material and introducing our presenter, Rich Lanza, I'd like to go through a few important housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. That'll be sent out approximately 5 to 7 business days after we finish the webinar, and that'll be sent via an email. NASBA rules do require us to ask polling questions during the webinar, and CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all of the polling questions. If you're joining us as a group today and you're viewing this from one location, you will need to submit the group attendance form and make sure that all of the email addresses are legible so that we can provide those CPE certificates to all the eligible participants. Those CPE certificates and the link to the recording, as I said, will be sent to the email address that you registered with in GoToWebinar. We are not responsible for delivery problems due to spam filters, attachment restrictions, or other controls in place for your email client, so please make sure that you have our address entered into your system, and if you need to contact your IT people, please do so. Otherwise, you may not receive either the CPE certificates or the link to the recording. You will have the opportunity to submit questions via the chat box on your screen. We'll answer them during or at the conclusion of the webinar. I will be monitoring those questions as well as Rich, so we will try to get to them as soon as we can. Usually we try to get to them during a polling question when we have a break. We will also be having a break, and I believe, Rich, we're going to do that at approximately 12 o'clock.
Yes, that sounds great. About an hour in. Thank you.
Okay. After the webinar is over, you will have an opportunity to provide feedback. Please complete the feedback questionnaire to help us continuously improve our webinars. If GoToWebinar does stop working, you may need to close and restart. You can always dial in and listen, follow along with the handout. The next slide provides disclaimers, and I'm not going to read that. That was sent out in the information that we mailed to you this morning. So at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Rich Lanza, and Rich will introduce himself and then get into today's material on building simple continuous reviews in ACL. Rich?
Great. Thanks again, Jim, and thanks again, everyone, for coming today. Looking forward to talking about this and also getting questions, because this is a topic of it's a different topic. It's not one that is as technical, and but yet we'll be giving away a lot of little technical tools. It is something where we're again not going through like how to script today in a very basic or intermediate way, but it's more of a discussion around how can you kind of set this up and set ACL into your audit plan and into each of the audits that you do. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and for the most part, trying to get companies to an image that you're going to see later. It's not that amazing or anything of a graphic, but yet it's sort of an end state that I think can work really well for companies. And I've seen it work well, but it doesn't happen that often. So again, that's what I've been kind of striving to do, kind of implementing these systems for companies. And as to the learning objectives for today, I wanted to start out with some sort of basic concepts around continuous monitoring, continuous auditing, what's the difference, and also kind of talking through the variety of things that I've seen as almost like best practices of how you should implement them in a very simple way. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to the data normalization. So about halfway through the course, about break time, we'll start getting more into data normalization, right after which we'll take a break. And then we kind of continue on and really talk about how some of the tools I'll give you even that can help, but how you can think about integrating a lot of analytics into each of your audit processes, how to score that activity, and then that'll kind of round us out towards the end of the day where we're talking about exporting work papers and how to do that in an auto way, as well as kind of looking at other tools and just thinking about, we're talking about ACL, but I think it was just kind of good to understand what are some of the other tools out there, as well as overcoming some of the obstacles of implementing some of these plans. And I wanted to do that at the end as almost a wrap-up because, excuse me, as we what I'm as I'm kind of seeing is everyone has a different way of doing it, and I think we may end up at the end of this day having like various other obstacles that we're talking about. So I kind of wanted to leave that to the end as a bit of a wrap up, and then that'll kind of conclude the afternoon. So with that, let us kind of go into why it's important and sort of, just defining, I believe, more of what is continuous monitoring and some of the best practices of implementing it just from a high level before we get into the details. So this is the image that I was talking about, and I've tried at some companies, I've even done it as long as about 13 years ago, and they're still running the system, which is amazing, but it's being run more at the local level. But I have a lot of companies that are starting to move to this model of implement a analytic command center within internal audit. And I'm not really sure of the level of internal auditors versus not today, but for the most part, a lot of the folks that come to the seminars are from internal audit. And if you can build that center where it has a lot of these modules built and it's a very advanced toolkit, you can then, excuse me, go to your shared services group that is managing these business processes and have them run a lighter version of the above. And that might be a version that even recovery auditors work off of, and obviously the process owners work off of. And then that feedback is given back to the internal audit department so that you could get a better toolkit each time. So, the goal is sort of build up this data mart in internal audit that's almost better than the companies, and have a bit of an auditor in a can, as I'm noting above there, and that you can essentially run at any time. But at the local level, they usually don't want to run everything that the auditor wants to run. So they're more or less just kind of running, some of the basic type stuff. So we'll talk more about this image. I probably will bring it up again. But I wanted to give you kind of that highlight as a way of thinking about how to implement continuous auditing and monitoring. The auditing is on the left-hand side. The monitoring tends to be more on the right-hand side, if from a definition point of view, in the sense that internal audit is doing more of the actual review of the information, and the continuous monitoring is being done more at the transactional level at the time, or maybe a week after the actual transaction took place. That's more of a monitoring versus an auditing at that point. So I think that's generally how it's been defined, in today's world. So continuing on here. So one of the things that I'm going to kind of drag across here, and we'll see how this works, is one of the files that I'll give out to you today is this buyer's guide. It's from 2007, so it's 7 years old. It's a bit dated, but what I liked about it was, let me just quickly show you here. I have a bit of best practices of implementing audit software, and this was a study that was done by 3 people, myself, Dean, and Mort Goldman. And just taking a look at, audit, anti-fraud software, we sort of looked at all these different types. And I think this book will be helpful, in the later parts too, if you think about integrating your data analytics with other products. So let me just kind of scroll into the table of contents. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just wanted to note we go through kind of the Sarbanes-Oxley tools, continuous monitoring tools, transaction analysis type tools, audit work paper tools, etc. And we, at the time, we listed out all the vendors and had kind of a page on each one. Now, people have changed since these times. Some of these companies have gone away. Some of them have kind of merged with other companies. So things happen over time. But for the most part, it's pretty good. And it really kind of talked about each one of the product lines so that you could see how continuous monitoring fit into it. Within here, though, somewhere in here, we have this best practices, and I believe it was on page like 29 or so. So I'll just try to head down there. But maybe what I'll do is I'll head back to the slideshow, and we'll just kind of talk it through. But it's like slide 29. We take each one of these and kind of break them out a little bit further. Now, in looking at all the audit softwares and thinking about like what worked and what didn't, regardless if it was audits, data analytics or audit work papers or what have you, these were the things that kept coming up. Start small, build iteratively. Don't, you can definitely kind of take one area and do a great job and then kind of move to other areas. Only add a lot of technology, after you thought through the process. And I think that's like the mantra of today's course. In the sense that instead of instead of doing it in a more complicated fashion, at least to start out with like a desktop license, running a few reporting on that, which we'll talk about later, and then trying to see if you can get some value out of the tool before you kind of keep going through this. So again, I think even there, it's sort of kind of going to the bullet number 1. I think kind of continuing on, managing scope, don't have it get too big too quickly. There is this need to build champions, but I will tell you what I'm finding is a lot of these champions, especially of ACL, are jumping companies left and right, because once they become valuable ACL users, people pick them up, and then they end up jumping ship. So you lose a lot of knowledge there. So I think you need a team and kind of keep it always at 3 people or 2 people or whatever, but have some backup there. But I also feel if you can build these continuous monitoring tools, it sort of reduces the impact a little bit, because if you have a toolkit that you're running, it does sort of limit, how do I run that report? You can just go back and click the button and it runs it. Integrating the components. I don't know if we have a lot of time on this today, but I know ACL is talking a lot about their GRC product. I think that's a good thing. I think you should, look into that and see how to integrate with, what they're integrating with these days to see how that could be utilized. It may not even be your main, risk assessment tool at the end of the day, but if it's great in kind of delivering analytics to the group and such, there's sort of that, there's something good about that. Getting it to a dashboard. I have a lot of clients, and what I'm finding with continuous monitoring is, as we'll talk, you end up running hundreds of reports, and try to go into a CFO's office and explain hundreds of reports to them. They really want to just look at 2 or 3 reports, 5 or 10 items per report, and we're going to talk about how scoring can kind of make that happen. Think about the whole total cost of ownership before buying, and that's something where, again, a continuous monitoring simple version like we're talking about today can be a great way of kind of starting it out, and then obviously get a cash return from it. And I think the key, though, is making it routine. I find more so than ever for clients, I'm a bit of a coach to say, hey, do you remember that data analytic project? Because we really should be doing that in your, in your day, because a lot of companies are forgetting to do this stuff. And I think that that's something where, making it where you're running an AP toolkit at every job that you're at, or a GL toolkit, I think is where it's going. It's just a matter of, kind of getting over that hump so that you can start delivering that to clients. Okay, so I think even though these practices were from 7 years ago and such, I still think they have a lot of relevant value and in today, and you can definitely take a look at it, take a look at the chapter on continuous monitoring and such. What I kind of came up with, though, was a smaller version, if you will, for continuous monitoring, a little more focused set of things to think about, why it's important, and that is, for the most part, we want to automate the data import process, and we're going to do a few examples of that. But we have some Excel macros, sorry, to improve. Yeah, so I'm going to show you how you can use Excel to kind of write some script code for you and give you those files as well. What I think is, though, if you can get raw files, this is how one company that I've worked with for 13 years has done this. They get files once a day, and those files are in a server drive, and the server drive is connected to the ACL document, and all it does is really just kind of look to those tables and in essence kind of download the information from those tables. Those tables are put there every night by IT as part of an automated job that's run for the last 13 years without incident, and it's something no one's really working on anymore. It's something that has been sort of automated, and then the person who's running it is just running a script, so they don't even know what's going on, but at least the toolkit can provide the answer. And I think that in a lot of ways, these continuous monitoring toolkits that we'll talk about can really kind of continue to provide an answer even when champions leave. The other thing, though, is, as we said, is you get a lot of reports, got to think dashboard, remove those false positives, and we're going to talk about how to score. I'm going to do a little bit of discussion on it, and just to note, I'm literally writing my 2 blog entries for ACL's blog. I write for them, and right now there's 2 of them coming, so it's all about scoring, and I give away the code on scoring and such, so it's something where I think it may be helpful. Just take a look at your ACL emails as they come in, or I'm happy to send it to you. But with that said, we can't talk about everything for too long today, but hopefully things like these blog articles and other things I've written and done, you could take a look at and get more information on. The documenting, saving, and videotaping your work plan, I mean, I am finding more and more that I'm actually videotaping everything I do. So as I'm working with companies, I'm videotaping it, and then so it's exact for their system as to how it works. And the product that I use is called Camtasia, and I'll just kind of quickly bring it up, not the product, but just the website for you. Hold on one second. There's a company out there called TechSmith, and they make a product called called Snagit. So here we go. Snagit's, of course, what comes up first, and then they have Camtasia. So if you go out to TechSmith, I use a product called Camtasia. There are many others, and some of which are free. This folk, I think they're probably about $300. Yep, $300 to buy a Camtasia Studio license. But what's really nice is you could do some really good screen capturing. You do not have to know what you're doing. It's very simple. And what I love about it is that you can go back to these videos. So, we'll talk later about other video things Jim and I have done, but for the most part, I find I am the best client of the videotape because I'm going back to it after the fact, and more than anyone, and taking a look at kind of what was done previously for that client so that we can figure out what to do next. And what I find is if you can document and save that as best as you can, it really kind of limits any impact of champions kind of moving on within the organization. Now, from a data analytic perspective, what I wanted to kind of quickly go through what are some of my thoughts there, and why should you have continuous monitoring in the first place, and that kind of thing. I think no matter if it's fraud or error or recovery, think prevention versus future detection. I'm sorry to keep going back to this one example, but it's just so perfect. this daily person that runs their duplicate payment report every day, they're looking at what they did yesterday. That's all they look at, is how has yesterday looked to the last 2 years, and they're able to kind of decipher, before it is actually paid, to actually change that invoice. Now that's done at a monitoring level, because that's down at the much more continuous type level. What I find auditing is usually kind of that process, but it's on a quarterly basis or something like that. Many people are doing it also on a daily basis too for certain things in continuous audit. But I, again, kind of giving you a perspective here, I think the prevention side tends to be more at the monitoring level, at the process level. But anyway, that's where you should be kind of building this so that a lot of these folks are within your organization are running this for you. From a continuous review process, what I find is if you can kind of set up the need for it and show the cash value of doing it, they do tend to put the right technology, the right staff time to it. One client just recently, they do it quarterly, but they have a person that literally, I would say half of his job is devoted to duplicate payments, credits, other errors we're making within AP. And this was all based on an internal audit that was done, and then therefore kind of changing how they do things. But that's something where by building in the cash value of these things, you can kind of build in the need for the process. Keep improving the model, though. I mean, the scoring aspect of things, of kind of looking at how can we model problems that we've had in the past for us, customized to us, and then try to kind of remove false positives accordingly, I think is the right way to go. Just a few things here on data marts and just kind of walking through some of the values here. I do believe ultimately you should get to a server. I do feel initially you can work in a desktop fashion and do quite a bit, and that's again kind of part of today's session, is how to do this simply, not in a very complex way. But I think getting to a server is where you're centralizing backups, having the knowledge in one place versus on everybody's laptops, having user management, security. What's really nice is if it's behind your network firewall and such, everyone's much more happy about things, that you're signing into the network, you're then signing into your data. It's really kind of clean. And there are benefits from a speed point of view, from a faster processing. If a lot of times our hard drives, aside from the fact that they can get stolen, if they're not encrypted, it's a real issue. But they're also not as fast as a server. So, I mean, it's something where, by optimizing a server a bit, you can do a lot. And when I say server, I mean the actual technology to run the server that we're talking about is usually in the low thousands of dollars. It's not, the server of $20,000 that sometimes is quoted to you from IT. I think you can get a much limited server to work off of and do quite a bit with. But anyway, with that said, I don't think data marts, all audits require it. I don't think you have to put all of it into, the server ultimately. I think there's some things that more simply run at kind of a desktop level forever. But I do think over time, I think it is a useful thing to do, and it sort of just kind of keeps it all in one place. You can back it up and, et cetera. I think you need to kind of do those smaller audits, as we've said before, in order to, anyway, you need to kind of go through some of the smaller, simpler examples before kind of moving on. And okay, just continuing on here, and just a few more slides before we get to our polling question here. The value of ACL scripting, though, is I think it's really great for routine tasks, and even if you're not building a massive continuous audit, continuous monitoring problem or system, for the most part, I find that you can automate a lot of these smaller tasks that impact an audit or just something that you're running on a quarterly basis, like a sample selection or something. I mean, there's always that. I think the value, though, also is that you're able to kind of build in the quality once, so that once it's built, and it runs and you tested it, you can kind of walk away from it and say, we don't need to have the champion go in and do that again. And I also think scripting, as we'll show you in a little bit here, with a lot of scripts that we have, it really kind of helps you see what's going on, behind the scenes with ACL. So I'm going to just kind of, yeah, I think we've talked about everything here. With maybe one last exception of the only thing I could say on this slide that's an additional is the fact that you might want to find a willing business unit to work with, so that there's somebody that is going through a big change or implementing, large scale implementation of a new system, or there's some reason why they kind of want you to help out in auditing what they're doing. And I find that those are the best ones to start out with. They become great references for later in the process, and something that you definitely want to kind of look for. So that's more of a political note. And I think the politics of continuous monitoring and auditing, again, welcome any questions on it, but I think it is something of a discussion how IT departments sometimes feel a bit threatened, by these toolkits as opposed to you using kind of their own system, be it like SAP HANA or something like that it's like a business development type tool that you can run a lot of reports on. Sometimes it's not the best audit product, but that's something, to definitely talk through. If you can find the business unit though and work small, kind of in a, in sort of a way, you're able to maybe get under that radar a bit and make some success, and then kind of see where to go from there. Do you put it into HANA or do you continue from there? Okay, well, let me kind of put out that first polling question. So let me launch that. I think we're at a good point. What is not one of the best practices for implementing continuous monitoring? What's not one? Start small. Sorry, I can't read it. Find cost recoveries, keep false positives, or automate the data import process. So A, B, C, and A. And looking at the questions, I know someone's saying they may not hear my audio. It's going in and out. I hope that's not the issue. I'm kind of looking at my audio meter that keeps going up and down, but I'm not looking at it constantly, so that may be happening, hopefully not, to everyone. Sorry about that, though. And we keep these polling questions open for about 90 seconds or so, and just to try to get everyone to respond in so we can get you CPE. You don't have to be right on these questions, but you do have to answer it. In going through it, again, we keep them open for about 90 seconds. And then any questions that come in, I do welcome them. These are the best times to kind of throw them out there. And we try to break it up like every, about 20 minutes or so. So there's another opportunity coming if not now. Most of you voted. We do kind of track how many votes you get and therefore give you the CP if you voted for all of them. So try to make sure that you're here. Keep it open just for a little bit more. I got about 90% voted, so I just don't want to cut anyone off. Excuse me. Okay, so let me close that poll, share it with everybody. And you will see 82% say keep false positives. You're absolutely right. You don't want to keep them. Get rid of them. They tends to plague a lot of their continuous monitoring when I talk to people, and they give me kind of their one thing that they gripe about is, there's so much to look at, and because it kicks it out, we have to look at it. So, what do we do? And we'll talk about that later with scoring. And again, I have some articles that are coming on that as well. Okay, so let me hide that, continue on with our presentation here. Everyone should be seeing that. So good. What I wanted to now talk about is the data part. What I find, and I don't have any study on this one, but I would say about 70 to 80% of the process is data normalization. And data normalization, I think, can be really useful. I have a couple projects right now that we've run with a data set for years, maybe about 2 years, but really just figuring out now that, I don't know if we picked the right table. There's actually another table that has, much more accurate version of the data. So it's this process that you're kind of constantly going through. And I think that even at the C level, companies are much more interested to hear how you can slice and dice data for them. than they may be capable of doing themselves because and understanding it. And I find maybe it's just because hopefully with the folks on the on the call, what I find is that most of us are auditors that are on the call today, and we tend to have that different mindset of really kind of beating up things and really understanding them and taking them apart and making sure it all ticks and ties and all that. And other departments, I won't name anybody, they may not be as careful, with the analytics. So I think audit does tend to be a great place to go for this and get some initial kind of reading. But at the same time, audit has this great opportunity to learn about the company. And we'll talk later about the general ledger analysis that we do, and I find that that's a great way to learn about the entire company. Once you get that data, that's really, big data is the big topic, and at the C level, what I'm finding is a lot of people are very interested to hear if you have some good big data type of reporting that you've been running. To that end, in the buyer's guide, this is one of the one of the best practices, or it's in there somewhere. We have this image, and it talks about the fact of how we really should generally just look at the ERP data, which is sort of this data over here, maybe customer data, supply chain management kind of data. But it's like this one slice, right? There's all this other data that we could be pulling in. And I will say that, out of all the companies I've worked with, probably the computer environment and activity logging would be something that we've pulled in. We might pull in a little bit of the audit result library. But that's about it. I find that the other kind of databases that you might want to link up with tend to not happen, especially whistleblower ones. I find that that's just a great one to link up with. Okay. What I'm also then saying with the data request process is in getting data, I find that normalization, the reason a lot of these data normalizations fail is because the data request is sent out like 1 to 5 weeks. Working with someone right now where, we're literally kind of asking for the data about a week before going out there. And that's hard, to be able to kind of get the data, quickly understand it, run the reports, and then go into the field. So what we've kind of gotten to is even getting to 8 to 12 weeks. I would even say 12 weeks out, because you can run a lot of stuff and analyze it, and then, a week before kind of give them a little audit report or something so that you could start even the audit before you show up. And I find that that's a much better way. But I think, the timing of data requests, of just changing that part of your, audit plan and saying, we need to start doing this like 8 to 12 weeks before. And even if we miss a little bit of a stub period, it's worth getting the data, as it is. Okay, so, because I do feel data importing is a really key point, I'm just going to quickly go through this slide, but it's, it's a bunch of kind of good points, I think, that you should definitely consider. I understand what you can do in ACL. I'll try to show you some cool things to do today that, I've shown to people recently, and they said, I didn't know I could do that, and it really saves a lot of time in normalizing data files. Understand what reports you want to run before you ask for data. We're talking about getting data because it is, I think one of the problems or obstacles of this reporting process, but at the same time, you need to kind of understand what reporting you want to do before you go out and start asking for tons of data. Trying to find those knowledgeable people, a lot of times data extracts are pushed down to like the lowest level of the IT organization because it's not really a big request like setting up a SAP system or whatever. So sometimes it's hard to get the right answers from people, but I think if you could keep pushing, or sometimes even go to the software manufacturer themselves, like they may have a tech support line that you can call and just get the answer directly. I think, running statistics, taking a look for really strange things like E+ shows up a lot in ACL data because if you pulled it through Excel, Excel has like a 30-character limit when it's working with fields, and otherwise it like turns it into one of these scientific numbers, and it has like an E+ after it. It really is annoying, but there are ways to solve it. Like how you save it in Excel and such, but I think just taking a look for those issues and then trying to correct for it, most people sadly aren't even looking for the issue. I like to get hard copy info just to get something, an invoice from someone, just to be able to look at the data. I think it's always, I'm constantly fooling myself and thinking that I'm looking at a check amount field, and I'm really not. I'm looking at something else, unfortunately. I think just validating field totals, kind of getting real files versus report files, getting data in Excel versus a raw format. We'll talk a little bit about that, as I show you a really specific example, in a bit here. But I think these are definitely some of the other areas that you should be thinking about in normalizing data to really get it as purely as possible. And what I don't have on the slide here, but would like to add in a way is, I find it's really helpful to, when you're extracting data, to actually get down and watch the IT person do it. And with web technology like GoToWebinar, like we're using today, or Glance, or any of these other products out there, if you could just view their screen while they're extracting the data, you could use that Camtasia product to make a video of it, and then that becomes a record of, this was the extract as taken on today's date, and et cetera. And I've done this with security files before, just to prove, we have like a trail, evidence trail of the data. And we can even watch the person upload the data to our server, and then we can download the data, and then it's all clean, and there's no way of tampering because we watch the person do it step by step. With all that said, I think that's something that you should consider going back to the original data as much as possible, so that you can really kind of understand where you're getting it, how they're getting it, if they're kind of pulling out certain things and leaving in others. That can really get annoying when you're looking at the data, because you could find that you have lots of voided or canceled transactions. One company I work with, we got a general ledger file, and this system that what it does is it tracks every inventory movement. So you ended up literally having about 20 million records of, we took this item out of the bin, we put it back into the bin. Now, when you look at the GL file, it was like, oh, it's 22 million records, but really it was 20 million records of this junk that I really didn't care about, of how many times people took bins out of the inventory and put them back. So that's just a great way of, again, the more you can kind of understand the data types that are going into the data, that was like an inventory record type. What you can do is, remove that stuff or look at it separately one day, but then, just kind of working with the remaining portion of it. And I think that kind of gets rid of a lot of the false positive issues that you might have as well. So another document that we'll give you today, a lot of little files just to kind of, get you started. And excuse me one sec, I'm just sort of opening up Word over here. Let me try this. Here we go. All right, so this was the file that we will send you again 5 to 7 days after the webinar. It's part of the CPE, and we put the video online as well so that you can get it. This here is a data request for accounts payable. Kind of gives you at the top here a bit of just the types of data fields and tables that you have. Then we have a few notes within here as well. Now, I still feel like you should be thinking about what reports you want to run so that you can come up with this data request, but I'm just kind of, starting, at the backward end of this and kind of moving, back to the front. The invoice header file notes that we have are things like, if it's easier for you to kind of provide the data in multiple files and we can put it together, that's fine, and we can do that. ACL has a great join functionality that you can utilize. And again, invoice distribution, we also talk about the vendor master file and the employee master file, I think. But anyway, then I go into the types of data. So I mean, you can change this around. I probably, would actually change this to put delimited files up here. I'm finding they're better these days. I used to find access data was pretty good if you got it. Flat files, though, is sort of a fixed length, or flat file is what it's called. Delimited files, though, I'm starting to find are pretty good. What I never liked about delimiter files is that if you had like a comma quote and then that showed up in the data itself, it would kind of lead to an error in that you would have certain fields that were splitting at the wrong point. And we're literally going to do this as an example later, so I'll hold off on that. But I'm just kind of letting you know that's some of the reasons I don't like delimited files. But sometimes that's the only way you're going to get it. So you got to work with it. Okay, data structure. Obviously asking them what are the field names and positions and all that. And then a key one is just data verification. This kind of goes back to some of the import process, obstacles, not getting a hard copy invoice, not totaling items, not getting the record count, just to get something. And then kind of further on below, we have kind of questions and responses that we would then be asking of things like, how do you avoid checks and other things. So we just tried to come up with as much as we could so that when we send it over and have a meeting about it online or something like that, that you can just get a lot done at once. There's not a whole lot of back and forth with, a question here or a question there. Okay, so with that, what I wanted to now talk about is delimited files and how you can automate things. So I've tried my best to kind of talk through a lot of the general concepts today of just how to build continuous monitoring, some of the obstacles, data normalization being one of them. But now I wanted to kind of get into more particulars in a really specific way around how you can split a data file that you get and automate that process, and then even use Excel to kind of map the data for you. So let me go into Excel here. I just bear with me for 1 minute. Okay. So what I've done here, and the key kind of character that we're using or punctuation is the ampersand. So that's that ampersand item right there. What I'm able to do is, let's say we imported a data file into ACL, and just kind of looking, just going to kind of bring over this ACL file for a second here. What you can do is when you import the data file in, just bear with me 1 second here. When you import the data file in, what you can do is kind of just define the fields as you normally would define those fields as like a tab delimited file. So you just kind of bring those in. That allows you to, first, you now know what the field names are, and you can kind of make sure that things line up and do some testing of the data and that kind of thing. Once you've done that, what I'm kind of showing here is if you did get a tab delimited file, I wanted to kind of show you not only the code, but also how you could use Excel to kind of write the code for you. And I'm using this over and over, like as I assign variables. Let's say for field names, what you can do is also kind of write some code, down here. I'll use the word assign, and you can almost just start, writing code. Bear with me 1 second here. Well, we'll do that in a second, but you can start writing code that will then even assign variables based on these field names. Okay, so let's imagine you got a tab delimited file, and what I would normally do in this case is kind of import that tab delimited file in. Now, just bear with me 1 minute here, and after you've brought it in, what you can do is define one field that is kind of the full record. So you're just kind of going out for as many characters as you can in the data. Now, I can kind of look at my table layout. Oops, sorry. I can look at my table layout options and say, okay, yep, full record is 27, and then I can highlight up to 27 and just say full record. Now that I have that field, if there were tabs within here, just in this data file, I'm just kind of showing this as an example, what this Excel script will do is define those fields. So in order to kind of show this to you, what I'm doing here is I'm taking various fields, and I'm utilizing this information here, like define field, and then we have define field. We're then taking this field here, vendor, and then we're taking this computation that follows it. And then that, goes through. And then we add a 1 to it, and then we add the length of that field that we want it to be. Now, and this is kind of why I like to import the data file first. We'll go through that a lot slower in a second, but what's kind of nice is when you do import the file for the first time and actually let ACL like do it for you, you're able to kind of have ACL calculate what some of the final lengths are in the data so that you can really kind of get a sense of it. What's nice though is in the future, you can take this data layout and link it to a new source data file and link it to the tab delimited file that the original one, and it should still work and allow you to run this code. So what you can do then is by using the ampersand, what I'm saying is, let me kind of redo this as best as I can. We're going to use the equal sign. I'm going to select define field, and I hit my F4 button. The F4 button will fix that in position. So we have define field, and then when I'm adding to that, I put an ampersand. I believe I put a space in there, and then I put another ampersand, and then I put this vendor field, and then I put another ampersand. Now that vendor field I'm not going to fix. As you'll see in a second, you kind of copy this downward, and it copies each field on the left into the formula itself. Okay, so now that I have the vendor, then we add a space again, and then I add this computed item up here, and then we add one more, I believe, a space. No, actually, I think I believe I add this and then a 1, and then a space, and then we use the ampersand, and then we pick this field here, which is the length of that field. And I probably am off a little bit here. The right version is down below. I think I missed one parentheses mark here. But what I was trying to show you is that you can not only kind of breaking into this formula a bit. Let me kind of did want to show you how to calculate it. But if I take this formula, bring it down here, just kind of bring it to a new little tab here, and I'm going to paste that in a special format. We'll just kind of drill into this a little bit better. Let's start from the middle and work our way outward. What we're doing here is we're saying we want to kind of take the first split field using full record as the full record, but we're going to split at the tab, which is a character 9, and I put that in there because it's hard to remember. If it's a comma, you would put, in this case, a comma within quotes, so just so you know that. But if it's a character 9, then you whatever, a tab, you use that. Or if it's a pipe, or you could use anything. A lot of people use pipes or other types of characters. Okay, what that does though is that splits it and takes the first item on the left, and that would be like the first field in the file. Then what it does is it all trims that, so it brings everything over to the left, and then it subs it for 6 characters. Now, one thing you may notice is I'm actually not using any punctuation in between the formulas or in the function itself of ACL. This is kind of a new technique. A lot of people will have commas in here, which is totally fine. You can have commas, but what I've learned is that if you use a space, it works, and you don't have to actually note it in ACL. Like it doesn't matter if you had anything in your settings. So where you kind of set that in the options here is in your numeric settings. You have this list separator, so it tells you where it's going to break within a function itself. If you use the space mark, you don't have to worry about that. So that's kind of a nice little thing to remember. But with that said, this will calculate a 6-character field called vendor, which is a fixed, it's fixed at this point. If you wanted to put in here for whatever, let's say it was vendor name, and you wanted to make it 50 characters because it's a big field, you could put in 50. And what ACL will do is it'll actually, if the data is only like 20 big or whatever, it'll pad it with spaces so that it gets out to 50. So it's a nice little feature. Again, my point of showing this to you today and just wanting to kind of walk through it in detail is that what's really nice about tab delimited files is that if you can set up a script like this where it's kind of calculating and in essence kind of, let me just start up here it's actually using this field over here as well in here. So it's saying this is the first field, vendor. This is vendor name. That's the second field. This is vendor address. That's the third field. Sorry, and I'm looking over around here in the data. So let me just throw a shape here if you can't see it. But I'm looking about here in the data with the 2 and the 3 and 4. What that does is it kind of splits it up nicely into the various fields, so that full record will be kind of split. What also you're able to do, though, is that you're fixing the length of the field. So ACL really ultimately kind of gets to a fixed length file. When it defines a table, everything, it's 27 characters big, and first field is 8 and the next field is 10, and and that's kind of how it works. And that way, if you can get to this fixed length file, what's really nice about that is that as you build more data into the table, let's say not a vendor table, let's say you had an invoice history table, you could get a quarter's more worth of data and add it on to the end of that original invoice header table and have it kind of build from there. Now, because you're fixing the length of all the fields, it actually fixes the normalization process so that you're able to kind of put things one on top of another, and it's just a great way to kind of run it. So wanted to show you this. I wanted to show you how you can use Excel. The key here is the ampersand. That is the item that will kind of, or punctuation, that will allow you to be able to kind of put fields together properly. So that is the data normalization. Let me kind of just close that. And just to note to you, from a table point of view, there's probably no good way to show this to you, so sorry about this. What I was, let me just try to just quickly bring in a table here just to kind of show you. Well, actually, let me start here. What I'm finding too when working with data normalization, if you do have an AS400 or COBOL and can use the external definition file, that's a great way to go. What I find is a lot of companies are getting to ODBC, where IT is opening up ODBC for them, and they're able to access it. SAP Direct Link is another product that ACL has, and a lot of people are using SAP Direct Link, which I think comes up as an option here. But I think getting to ODBC is also good in that it fixes the lengths of fields. So, you ultimately want to get a fixed length file, be it you build it yourself using an Excel kind of toolkit that I'm giving you, or if you do it a different way by using like ODBC. I just, in talking about the field types though, I just wanted or file types, sorry, in getting data, I would say for continuous monitoring over time, I mean, you want to get to more ODBC fixed length files and away from a lot of this stuff. The only exception would be the delimited file, because I can fix that in my, as I kind of showed you today, that's a little bit easier. I find even the print image report files, they're never perfect, and I just never like to fully rely upon them. I have not really worked with XML and things like that, and I find DBase is something, and ACPAC, these are kind of older standard files. So, I really kind of come back to, I think, the fixed length file, the delimited file, are still, and maybe ODBC access or direct link access, are the best, because they're all creating something I can control, which is ultimately creating this fixed length file. Okay, so let me get out of that. I wanted to show you a few of those. And I will launch the next polling question, which is, what punctuation mark is used to combine the fields, the fields in AC, so it was kind of the tables part, but the fields in Excel, so that we were able to kind of combine the code together for those fields in Excel. Is it brackets, ampersand, asterisk, or semicolon? Yeah, so a few people had noted that rerunning the webinar may have helped them. In that, I apologize if you're not hearing my voice, or I'm, internet's cutting out or something like that. But I am kind of tracking the audience view as I talk, so it tends to keep moving forward. We're keeping this open for about 90 seconds or so. If there are any questions on what I'm doing so far, hopefully it's all making sense to you, but if you have any questions, feel free to post them. It's a good time. And I would also say what we'll do is we will take a break in a few minutes. I think we said we're going to do it at 12, so I'll talk up until 12, and then we'll take the break for those that may have planned something at 12 o'clock on the button. And that's 12 Eastern time. Okay, so about 90% have voted. I got 91% the last time, so there may be a few of you not voting today. Getting up there a little bit here, so thank you. And almost done. Don't have any questions coming in though, so if you have any though, feel free to post them. I do find the data normalization part is the key of this process. If you can, as I said, it's about 80% of the nut. After that, I find the 20% is really just running reporting and kind of, but a lot of that's because of ACL. It makes it really simple. You run a duplicate command or something, and it does quite a bit for you without having to code too much. So I'll share that with you. The ampersand is correct. That is what you're using to kind of put those fields together. Okay, so one question came in, why are we preparing the script via Excel? Although I kind of showed you a simple example, what I like about Excel is, so what I'm finding with Excel is that a lot of people like to use it as a configuration file. So it's almost like what you could do, let me kind of go back. So most of you got ampersand, sorry, 89%, thank you. And let me hide that. And hopefully, yep, everyone's seeing my screen here. So what's nice about the Excel version of that is that you're able to then kind of create or have a script that you tell people, like notice I have a lot of scripts here that you'll be working with, but we just kind of adding a new script here. If we had a script in here called, data import, and it's something really simple, and everyone kind of knows it's like at the top, and what you do is you just go to that Excel file and make whatever edits you want to make here, so that if you wanted to change like the name of the field or something of that nature, you just kind of change it in Excel. Like it's a lot easy. And this, I will admit, I mean this, this version of the file maybe not the cleanest, but I wanted to show you I kind of basically copied and pasted what comes out of ACL's display function. So if I'm in ACL, this is a really, got to open up a file here, but if you hit the display function, that will kind of give you this information here. And then by copying and pasting that, I was able to kind of copy and paste it down here too and reutilize it. But I find that a lot of people, again, not as technical in ACL, feel better about working here, and then if you tell them, okay, all you got to do is take that and copy it into the data import script where we might have a comment that says like import data here. You would then just copy and paste that to there, and then this to here. And it sort of relieves them of the process of writing all this wonderful code that very few people understand, sadly, in today's day. So it's something where a lot more people are learning ACL and other products, but it's still something where it's usually a few champions within the group. What the Excel file does in this case is obviously not only kind of, fix it for you from a fixed length point of view, but it also allows you like a configuration file that you can utilize and quickly kind of update and then say to someone, okay, you just have to copy that code into this section and then hit the go button. And then from there, ACL will then run all the scripts that it needs to run. So I find too that sometimes I'll have like 100 fields here that I need to do this for, and this makes it so much easier, right, to have to kind of copy and paste down the formulas. So even from the coding point of view, it sort of made my life a little bit easier too. Okay, so can you explain the benefit of setting the field length in Excel as opposed to using the character positions in ACL itself? Yeah, I think, well, actually, let me get back to, we have some questions coming in, which is great. So when importing print image file, sometimes it's better to import the complete record line into ACL and then break it into a record using like a split and substring function in ACL. And I fully agree. It's almost like, by sometimes these print image files, if they are text files, that's a lot better. But what I find is if things kind of move a little bit, the split substring function is much more imprecise, I guess, as the ACL's kind of report editor, where it's really precise. And if things move just a little bit, that thing won't work anymore. Whereas, with the split substring that I'm showing you in this, example, you can utilize that as well, with the print image file. So thank you for that. Okay, what are some of the benefits of setting the field lengths in Excel as opposed to using the character position in ACL itself? I think it's something where I generally, when I'm setting the field positions in Excel, I usually use ACL first to kind of tell me where things are, kind of falling. And then in here, I just think it may just be easier to kind of edit them here so that you're not having to go into ACL to do the coding. You can just utilize a script to do it for you, and again, you're just going into Excel, so I don't even have to remember a lot, right? I can just go to this tool and say, instead of that being 66 characters, we want that to be 75 characters, and that updates the code automatically, and then I can go from there, and that's ways of some benefit. Yeah, and I did show, how does it work with ACL. I showed you how you copy and paste it into ACL, really just to be able to define the fields themselves in a more kind of automated way, and I think some people are noting that. So, okay, with that said, we're coming up on 12 o'clock, or, Eastern time, and so why don't we take a 5-minute break? So I'll kind of go into a bit of a break mode for 5 minutes, and we'll just be back in at 12:05 or 5 minutes from now, and get started again. If there are any other questions, feel free to put them through, and I'll just I'll get to it at 12:05. Okay, well, I believe it is 12:05, so just kind of coming back online here, and we'll just get started in just a couple of seconds here. Try to look at all the questions. I believe we've answered all the questions so far. Okay, so we'll get started. So maximizing the audit plan itself and just thinking about how to kind of build that organizational viewpoint is something I wanted to talk about. I think well, let me kind of go through a couple of study points first, and we'll kind of get into the meat of it. But what I'm kind of noticing too is that when you think about how many people are using data analytics in the audit plan process. So it's something when I'm setting up my audit plan for the year, there's a lot of discussion today. Things have gone to dynamic budgeting and dynamic forecasting. As from a company perspective, I think I'm not an expert in these areas, but you're starting to see more of a dynamic audit planning as well, so that people are starting to realize that the annual audit plan process it just doesn't work, and it really requires more of a kind of a dynamic nature to it. I don't know if that's really necessary. I mean, I still feel even if you're getting data once a year from each of your groups in a variety of areas, and then able to kind of utilize that toolkit across all of them and see which companies are kind of throwing off the most problem, let's kind of use them as our audit. So ones that, let's say if we're looking at a general ledger, are throwing off lots of keyword type reporting, or journal entries that kind of look really strange, or activity that starts to look like it's getting out of control or something like that. That's something that you can analyze and start to really understand by looking at things once a year even, and doing that. What I find though is that most companies are not even looking at the data at all. I don't even think some people have raised their hand in groups that I've had before and said, we will take the trial balance of the company and say, this company is, from a total asset point of view, is bigger than this company, and I'm going to pick this one and that one just based on materiality. They're this big, that's the only rationale why they're picking them. What I'm trying to get to is more of a qualitative review, and something that you're really using analytics to say, we're using it in running actual reporting, and then deciding where to kind of focus. What I also find, this is just a slide here, but just trying to think through here, even to have for each one of your process points, if you could have reports that you map to that. This is something I ask every auditor I work with whenever we do an audit, is what's the audit program that you're using? You have to give me something to kind of work with, because then I can align data analytics to it. And obviously I can give it, other examples and ideas that people may not have thought of, but I think that initial process of kind of mapping the reports to the process itself is very good. And be it whatever you're doing, you might be doing a performance measurement type toolkit, has nothing to do with auditing. You still want to think about, what are those performance measures that I'm trying to get to, and what reports get me there, because when you do that, you're able to then ask, what data do I need? So based on the report mapping, based on the process, you can then kind of get to what actual data do I need to extract. And that's kind of this next slide here. We're just, showing you another example where what I've done here is kind of taken a variety of the reports that we're running. So again, we figured out what's the process step, then the report, and then, what data do we need? And this here is kind of laying out, what are each of the fields that we need for each report. And then that way it gives us a way of kind of understanding, how, the report should be put together kind of for analysis. Okay, so I like doing these exercises. It may not be as clean and neat as this when I'm doing it sometimes. It may be something that we're kind of just at a high level, noting. when we look at the reports. But I do think if you can get to this level of detail, it does help because ultimately you're going to lead to a much better data extract. From a query viewpoint point of view, this is a slide I show all the time in webinars, and it's something it's sort of like my best, I guess my best viewpoint of all the things you can do in ACL. You want to take a situation and look at it from a who, what, when, where, why perspective. Who's processing it? What are they doing? When? Where are they processing it? Where even from a geolocation point of view are they, testing it? And then why are we doing this? And the why, I like to look for things like just strange activity. Why do we have so many round dollar items with this one particular customer, and et cetera. I think the reports also follow more of a query where you're asking questions like, does the vendor file match to the invoice file? Does the vendor file match to the employee file? These are kind of queries that I'm running to look for differences. Data mining is more or less just throwing it into like a pivot table and just looking at it. And, ACL is quite good for that. I mean, I have to say, because it's very fast, but sometimes even a pivot table works even better, where you're able to kind of very quickly summarize by the different document types and other types of, data in there. So with that said, I wanted to I'm going to kind of end on this slide for a second and come back to it. I wanted to kind of show you an ACL, one of the files that we promised in the registration. I want to get it to you. This is a book I produced a long time ago, 1997, but it still has relevance. It's the ACL Toolkit. And let me just kind of open this up here, just kind of bringing over the PDF file so you could see this first. But this is a book with 101 ACL applications. It's a toolkit for today's auditor. We republished it back in 2000, but it goes way back. Anyway, for what I wanted to show you, and I don't think I have this in one viewing, but we have basically the various reports that you can run by area, so you can get a sense of general ledger reporting. Oops, sorry. Let me just apologize. Let me just get down to the bottom here. We have general ledger reporting. We have accounts payable and purchasing, procure to pay type reporting. And we have a lot of that, and payroll processing reporting. So these are just all examples. The billing and receivable management, etc. All these reports, and the word, the 101 ACL applications, my hope of giving it to you today is that you could at least, maybe if you're going into like a payroll process and you're looking to kind of audit payroll, or let me just kind of get down to that section somewhat quickly if I can. But bear with me one here. So what's nice about the toolkit, again, very dated, but what it does is it talks through all the data files that you might want to ask for in the payroll process. So HR files, payroll files, etc. We have some data verification scripting that you might want to take a look at using. It's all written for you, which is nice. And let me just get to one of these applications so I could just kind of show you. There's some theory to documenting this stuff, and and like I've kind of said, I'm trying to get to a good report, and I really should have just jumped to the right page here, but okay. Comparing payroll costs from one period to another. What is the overview of that test? What are some of the audit objectives that are met with that test? I think documenting it even to this level can be really useful for each test that you do, just knowing what data fields you need, and then having the actual script, which we used to call batch in those days. We're using data files from 1996, so we do apologize, but that's, it's kind of old stuff. But it still works fine, and the data files that you'll see in the ACL document work great. What we do here is then kind of explain the batch itself and have a lot of comments and that kind of thing. I only wanted to show this to you just to say this is a great way of documenting things, even having after, all the scripting. Let me say at the bottom here what audit steps that you might want to perform on the results can be kind of a useful, tactic in kind of working with these files. So, okay, the one thing that I need to note is that we are using hard-coded fields in the data. In the scripting. So in essence, you have to name, in your HR file, or in this is the payroll file, the employee number needs to be called employee number. Employee last name needs to be called employee last name, or the script coding won't work. So that, this is kind of old technology, right? Like old ACL scripting. But here's the script here. We have, let me save that for you. This is the accounts payable number 1. I think we were kind of looking at, from a payroll point of view, it might have been looking at like test number 4 or something. Let me kind of go up. Yep, here. So this is test number 3. Here's the script code here. It's the same as in the book. But notice here how the field names are not variables. Now, whenever you set up a field name in a script, this is more of our earlier courses, you kind of have to use the variable, which is the percentage marks, and you kind of set a variable. I'm setting that variable up here. So this is where I'm kind of accepting this, and if I run this little command, you can't bring it up. But it's something where when I run the script, it'll allow me to accept that, and then I can enter in a variable called average field. That is a variable, and you can kind of see that with the percentage marks. However, the others are not, and that's something where you really have to hard code the field names. With that said, you have 101 scripts to work with once you hard code the field names, and the tables themselves you can even take a look at when aligning to your data. Like we were looking at the payroll file, so here's the payroll file. This gives you an idea of the different table field names and how we laid out the data for this particular table. So your goal is to kind of try to get it back to this format so that you can run the scripting. But again, hopefully this even provides you some benefit of just showing an example of what some of these tables look like so that you can get an idea of how you can go about asking for the data and extracting the data yourself. Wanted to show you a lot of reports and then go back to the presentation. Bear with me, just bringing this back over here. The one area I did not talk about is T&E reporting. That seems to be a hot item. So what I've done here is kind of added some T&E reports. I don't have the scripting for it, but at least I've given you some ideas of what reporting you might want to run in the T&E area in order to process reporting there. So, some examples, just to quickly go through it. Some of the ones that I like the most is even just looking at card holders to active employees. A lot of times you will find other people on there that have kind of snuck into your particular card plan. Taking a look at various currencies, like more than 2 or 3 even, in a given day. So you could say like, how are they in Switzerland, Germany, and Italy all at the same time? I guess it could happen, but it's probably not that possible. Identify cards that had no activity in 6 months. Card holders that have more than one card. Cashback credits is a big thing where people actually can get cash on the card. It's always a little bit kind of scary. But kind of talking about that, the different formats. We were talking before about the different ways of, when you look at all of the 101 ACL applications that we have, they all kind of fit into this framework of who, what, when, where, and why, where we're summarizing things by the who or et cetera. But it's more of, it's usually a query. So it's looking at kind of differences between one time frame and another, and very kind of or etc. But from a when point of view, it might be looking for weekend activities, so things that are happening on a weekend within payroll versus other days. These are sort of the queries. But then there's data mining, and what I found is, especially in the T&E area, more than any other area, like all the frauds I found, all the issues we've ever found in T&E, came from just trending things, and you just summarize it, summarize or classify or cross-tab. Cross-tab is kind of the pivot tabling in ACL's cross-tab, and just looking at categories of spend by title. Maybe, that could be a great cross-tab. What I find is looking at it by title, vice president, department director, etc. Those are the the ones to kind of go after, because you tend to find that if you get an average by title, average spend, you can look at people that are way above that average and then start to see why is that happening. It usually is something of an issue. But what the 101 ACL applications is more of is a lot of query reports, very specific kind of, does this match that one and that kind of thing. And I wanted to, continue to kind of note here that I think data mining, especially in T&E and other areas, should be part of your continuous monitoring. Like, as much as you have all these query reports that are really specific, I think you need to also have some of these more general summaries that are kind of put into an Excel dashboard or graphed into an Excel dashboard for you so that you can actually, make use of it. Then, taking a look then, continuing forward, we have all these reports, we have 101 ACL applications. How can we kind of score that activity so that we can really start to look at where there's an area for getting rid of false positives? So what I do is I actually, I'm going to show you an example where we score by vendor, but I think you could score at the transaction level. And what you want to do is say, does this one accounts payable payment show up on a duplicate payment report? Does it show up on a round invoice report? Does it show up on an in-sequence report? What are all the reports that it's showing up on? Let's kind of add all those reports up and decide which one is mathematically most severe. And what you'll find is if you start to kind of score in this way and look for transactions that are showing up on lots of reports, there's more of a chance that there's a problem, that it is a duplicate payment or it is some sort of an overpayment. So the key here is that you want to pick things that are rare in several ways. You don't want to just pick a weekend invoice. You want to pick a weekend invoice that is unusual, that is large, that etc. It has various other factors to it, and that's why I think by scoring you can do that. You can run lots of reports at once. Once I've done the scoring, what I like to do is kind of summarize on the who, what, when, where, why, so that way, if I know from a scoring point of view, who are those top vendors that have the top scores? Who are the top employees that are entering the information into the system that have the top scores? What accounts are they posting to? What's the dollar size? What's the growth rate? What's the amount of time, that they, to kind of, where is the time frame that they're kind of running it, or what are differences in between, say, the invoice date and entry date, to kind of look from that perspective as well, and look at that from a scoring point of view to see do we have issues there because the scoring is kind of showing that or not. So there's a lot of things that you could do by using the scoring. You can almost find transactions that are showing up on lots of different reports and therefore have lots more of a reason to be looked at. So this is kind of a simple version of the code that I wanted to just show you today. And again, I'm writing a couple blog articles on it. It goes into much more depth, and we've done past webinars on transactional scoring, so that's another aspect of things. But what I'm finding is that if you have, say, a supplier file like I do here, and you notice in the left-hand side we have the supplier number in here, what I'm doing is I'm taking each report that I ran. So I take one report and say, what supplier numbers are showing up that have high dollars and low transactions? Which suppliers have blank information? Which suppliers have lots of round invoices? And what I'm doing is just joining the files together based on supplier number. And you can kind of see that here. And I'm adding on a score each time. So that score might be, well, for 3 reports, you might make it 33%. So it adds up to like 100. You make one of them 34%, and it adds up to 100%. But that's a way of doing the scoring. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but that's kind of a simple way of doing it. And I like showing this code because I think it kind of, just to note, now that you have this code, imagine instead of doing it on supplier, you could do it on the transaction number. And what you'd want to do is kind of create your own record number, or kind of create use the voucher number or something. There'd be some way that you'd have to kind of get to what is a record that's unique. Just like a supplier number is unique, we also need to kind of, basically make the invoice number unique as well. So what we then do is kind of join together the files that of each report and we add on a score each time, and the way we're joining it is we're kind of joining to that particular supplier number, which is the key field that is in there. Okay, and one question came in. What do you mean by a round invoice? It could be the full dollar amount, which is 00, meaning in the cent position. Also, it could just be 00 with some cents on it, but I tend to find it's a fully round dollar payment, like $1,000, $2,000, $20,000, and it's 00 at the end of each one of them. I also find from a round multiple point of view, it's also usually at the $1,000 level or $100 level that is kind of considered to be sort of a round dollar. Okay, so from a code point of view, this is sort of how you'd put together the scoring, kind of adding lots of them together at once. And just bear with me 1 second here. Yep, okay, so let's continue on. I guess before I do this, let me just kind of jump to the polling question, because we're sort of at that time frame, and I like to keep up with these. So we have, what is not one of the query viewpoints? Is it who, what, how, and when? So who, what, how, and when. Great time for questions if you want to, pop in a few. We do have a few topics left to discuss, but, kind of on track, actually, time-wise, so that's good. And I want to show you a couple of other kind of neat ACL features, and then we'll conclude with the overcoming obstacles, which is sort of a, just making sure that we've covered all the different reasons why people have trouble with this stuff. But yeah, post some questions. If you don't mind, answer the polling question. We have about 92% voted, so thank you. I'll keep it open for like 90 seconds. Feel free to post questions. Okay, almost everyone has voted, so I think we're about there. No questions have come in. We had a lot of questions in the middle there, so I do appreciate that. That kind of keeps me on my toes. And I will then, at just another few seconds, I'll close the poll. Okay, and share that with everybody. And yes, you are correct. It was sort of how. I mean, how and why are technically, I think, synonymous, but I didn't use it in my slide, so that was the trick question there. Okay, so kind of now moving into a discussion mostly about general ledger auditing and how I do feel like the general ledger is one of these like untapped areas, and you really can get a lot of value out of it. Okay, with that noted, I think that for the most part, no matter if you're looking at accounts payable, revenue, I've seen some people start to look at the inventory processes within their companies on a more continuous basis and kind of tracking expired products, pulling together lots of different reports on a daily basis, even just to, see on a daily basis, are we keeping up with this stuff? But, okay, we're sort of repeating what we've said before. I mean, it's obtained data at least once a year in a planning exercise. The UK bribery office, I always note this, they ask for data, I think, like every quarter or every 6 months or something from companies, especially ones that are governmental institutions. And, I don't think anyone really knows what they do with the data, but wouldn't this be a great way to kind of use it as a planning exercise, that if you got data once a year from each of your locations, that you could do some analysis? It might be AP data, it might be T&E data, I don't know what, but that's, for you to kind of risk assess and decide what you want to do. You could then run a series of tests across that data and be able to utilize scoring to really say, which locations now have the highest scoring of all the reports? If I take all the reports that I've just had, and which one's throwing out the most problem? Let's take a look at that. Also feel prototyping, using this kind of development platform of ACL as the desktop platform is a great way to do this. But it's also a way, again, to kind of build a more dynamic audit process. I mean, I keep saying do this annually because I don't think anyone's doing it. Very few companies are doing it. But if you could do it quarterly or every 6 months even, I think that could be a really valuable exercise. Okay, going into general ledger, though, and using this one as a bit of an example, like if you don't know what to look at, you might want to look at the general ledger. I mean, it is a really big file, so I don't want to, kind of tell you go to the general ledger and then you're going to say, oh my gosh, we had 50 million transactions and I didn't know what to do. And with that said, I mean, the general ledger, what's really cool about it is your external auditors, nor if you are an external auditor, you're working with it, but every quarter they're normally getting data from the company, and it's so kind of interesting to me that companies have this data. Usually the internal audit department extracts it for external audit, gives it to them, but then they make no use of the data themselves. Like it is such a valuable lifeblood of the organization, the general ledger, so that you could use the GL not only to kind of look at accounts and companies that are having a lot more activity, but you could do a scoring and start to look at ones that have journal entries that are really kind of questionable or starting to kind of look a little weird. Maybe some sort of financial management or cooking the books, if you will. But also, I think you're able to kind of look at, let's say, activity of inventory in general or activity of revenue and start to look at by company, who's posting the most and how are they posting it and how many transactions is this company posting versus that one. And it just opens up a lot of questions that you can ask, the company and the data. And I do find that it's a great way, to plan your audits with, and just, again, looking at these top areas. And I also feel that, saving money is a key point of that as well. So I think, even though we need to kind of focus on fraud, I think you can also look for savings from cost recoveries that might come. Some of the things that, just from a general ledger point of view, I've seen companies start to do almost like a efficiency analysis to say, we have X number of people working in this department and they're posting this many entries. And, in essence, try to look for like, why do we have some departments where they're posting thousands of entries, but there's only like 2 of them. And then we have other departments that have 20 people and they're posting, 1,000 entries. And it's sort of odd. So, I think that looking even for efficiency within the general ledger can be interesting. I also find it just kind of opens up a lot of discussion. From a journal entry, I call it even though it's continuous monitoring, I call it more of a surveillance system. It's almost like a video monitoring of your data, especially if you can get this data on a weekly or monthly basis. You can really start surveilling what's happening in your locations and who's posting what into the general ledger at all levels of the company, but also to start kind of determining what are who are those locations that you really should be looking at. Obviously, ones with really unusual changes in activity over time, by the different accounts that they're using. From an amount perspective, who's entering it, kind of certain accounts like suspense that might be concerning, you might want to look at that as well. We also, a lot of companies don't really track this well, but I think once you start running this data, you start to identify journal entries that are problematic and might also be problematic for other companies within your organization. And therefore, you really should kind of risk assess those unusual journal entries across the whole organization. I think even just looking whether or not, unauthorized people are posting to the GL. Like, again, the GL is like the lifeblood. It ends up becoming where everything ends up. So even people in accounts payable are kind of posting data, and the enterer of that a lot of times is that person in accounts payable. So you're able to kind of see, every level of the organization in one place. But I don't want to, overestimate or underestimate the ability of saving money, and I think companies really do appreciate when you can find money. I think this is a book I wrote for John Wiley, Cost Recovery and Turning Your AP Department into a Profit Center, and really kind of looking even just at the AP portion of GL spend. So it's the distribution to the GL. That it's not the invoice 1, invoice 2. It's where did those invoices post in the GL. by looking at that data, you're able to determine, what's hitting health benefits and leases and freight and, and start to maybe decide, hey, we should be doing recovery audits in these areas because there's so much money going into it, or there's a trend towards more money going into it. Okay. Some of the tests that you might want to look at are general ledger accounts that are sole sourced. So you have a GL account number, 125000, and it is sole sourced by this one vendor for over $50 million. That's something to look into and determine whether or not, we have a conflict of interest, or is this the only supplier that we work with? Is it like a supplier risk, now to us as a company? Also kind of having too many vendors and being inefficient. That usually means that you're not getting savings of pooling all your money together into one or two or three vendors, and also kind of getting value from that. It's okay to have one vendor. I've seen companies that use FedEx and they use it for everything, but they also work to deal with FedEx that's so good, that they can't get away from it. It's like we save money every time we use it. So that makes sense to me. But it should be looked at every few years, and conflict should be taken out. Again, ones where you have too many vendors, you're using all the different carriers, you're never getting kind of a pooled benefit. I think even just looking for who are the top 100 vendors and other things are very useful as well. And what's really kind of interesting with that, what I found is, most companies, they post in the general ledger, but it's posted at the detail level in the general ledger. So you have all the vendor information right there. You don't have to get an AP extract a lot of times. Just to start out, you can use the general ledger data as a starting point. So a lot of good, reasons for finding fraud, for finding money, etc. To definitely use that. AP and GL tend to be the first two areas that we all look at. So, that's definitely something to consider. Okay, let me just jump on here. I wanted to then kind of show you another, I kind of showed you the import into ACL, and obviously we have lots of reports that were given you as part of the 101 so that you can think up all the cool report ideas that you can be running. But then we need to kind of talk about the export routine as well. And I just want to kind of show you this export routine file that I'll send you. Just bear with me one second here. So the export file itself, what we, I guess, what we had here was a tables for export.xls. So it has just a file, just an Excel file, and it had 5 or 6 tables in it. So, and these are tables that you want to export from ACL. So, you kind of put that in there. Now, we all know when we run lots of ACL stuff that we create lots of files, way more than, what I'm only showing you 5 files here, but, and again, we imported that Excel file, and it was called tables for import, so that's right here. So you can see that as well, sorry. Let me just, so these are the 5 tables as part of tables for export. Now, I have a couple of pieces of code here. It's a little advanced, but it works pretty well, so if you just want to use it. In essence, it kind of stops and tells you, we're about to export all the tables. It then basically kind of opens up a dialog saying, do you want to continue? And then it opens up that tables to export, that file that we just showed you with 5 fields in it. It calculates how many records are in there. So there's 5, I believe, in there. And that becomes the rec count. And then it starts out with a counter of 1. And then it says, do the second script as long as the counter, 5, is less than 1. Or excuse me, sorry, the counter, in this case, 1, is less than or equal to the number 5. In this case, it is. And so it'll now go down to work paper export sub. Again, a little more complicated, but I'm just kind of showing you here. It'll open up that table. It'll find that first record, and it'll actually take the table name out of the file itself. So it goes to first record, employee master file, and it saves that into memory as vtable. And then what it does is it actually calculates where you are on your hard drive. So it kind of figures out where is the path to this ACL project. Then what it does is it looks for a folder called work paper export, which you don't have to have. You can call it whatever you'd like here, but this is line 30. This is kind of a key point that on your hard drive, which I'll just bring up here quickly, on your hard drive, you do need this folder called Work Paper Export. So and ACL won't create that for you, so it's something to consider. But okay, with that noted, that could be changed to whatever you want or deleted. It then calculates where it is. It figures out that Work Paper Export is one step lower, so it figures out it's on this section of my hard drive in my AuditNet, July 2nd, files for, so, it figures all this out, that whole, component here. And then that is kind of brought into this variable called vpath for project. So that was that big long string. That then is added here to Work Paper Export, and then the file name table clean, which we got as the first record, which was employee master file. So that is employee master file.xlsx, and then it exports the files and does that. What's nice here is that, again, I'm trying to control things. And let's say you ran all of these wonderful reports, but you only want to export 5 or 10 files. This is a great way to run it. Let me just kind of hopefully show you how to get this to go here. All tables listed in tables to export will be exported. Okay. Do you want to continue? I'm giving you lots of options to kind of get out of this. And then it just took each file, and then it says all tables listed in tables to export has been exported. We can go over to our Work Paper Export folder, and notice here everything was created today at 12:40. So it's something where it's going to export only those files. So again, just trying to control things. We have the import controlled, we have the middle controlled, we now have the export controlled through some scripting for you, just to give you some nice simple things that you can get started with in your journey through continuous monitoring. Okay, I should go to this. Let me just kind of go just another second or two, and then we'll kind of, well, actually, we may as well go to this polling question. So let me just kind of get here. Apologize. So what we had was, what command is used to obtain the folder where ACL resides? Is it set echo on? Is it open? Is it while? Or is it dir, so directory? We did show this to you kind of quickly, but hopefully you saw it. And again, just answering is all that counts. It is something of just kind of for tracking purposes. If there are any questions, feel free to post them. We will have sometime at the end of the seminar, just about 5 minutes or so before 1 o'clock, for any other final questions as well, if you want to save it till then. And again, I'll kind of break this off at the 90-second mark just to kind of keep things moving. Don't see any questions coming in so far, so hopefully this was useful content. One note, we will be giving you a lot of these files, but also a video of today's session. So to go back, I find sometimes we're going through a lot of information quickly to try to give you a lot of value, and at the same time, that's something that you can go back to the videos and watch. And I'm trying to keep them out there for about 6 months right now, so that's something that you can do as well. So, okay, let me close this poll and share that with everybody. And dir is correct. The open command was probably really close too, but the dir command was how we're doing it. Okay, great. So I did show that quickly, and that was in that work paper export function that we were just talking about. So, what are some of the popular ACL? I wanted to now kind of talk through the pros and cons of the different tools and such. I still feel, what are some of the more popular products that are out there? ACL AX is obviously at the top of the heap. I mean, I think ACL still has the best natural language that you can utilize. in order to kind of script your data. Arbutus, as well as ACL, it's very similar in nature, and obviously it has that natural language to it. Active Data for Excel, Topcats, they're more of Excel add-in tools. So they're good, but I don't know how you really continuously monitor with it because you have to kind of manually run a lot of reporting. With Topcats, though, he does have a lot of these reports kind of written for you, but they run in, they run in Excel, but it's something that's something to consider as well. Microsoft Access and Excel themselves are kind of open in that you can do anything with them, but you need to code it, and that's sort of hard, to do. I find with Active Data, Microsoft Access, Excel, for the most part, you're really having to kind of manually click through a lot of this work. Topcats has a little bit where it is programmed for you, so you can actually run reports that they give you. IDEA allows you also to kind of code into IDEA, but it's usually using Visual Basic, which is very similar to Excel and Access and Active Data, and it's a little bit harder to work with. I mean, some companies have have Visual Basic Pros that can do this stuff, but it isn't something that the normal, auditor would know how to do. So natural language, I still think, are some of the key reasons why I've stuck with ACL and in utilizing scripting, because it's something I can write and then go back to over and over. I mean, looking at all the reasons why you pick a tool, though, I mean, there's processing of the speed of it, how good the server technology is working, the ease of use of the product, the customer support, years in business, and how it integrates with work papers. And I, just bring your attention back to the one other file that will be given you today, this buyer's guide, in the sense that I do think it kind of talks to that, and I know ACL is talking a lot about that these days, where hopefully by utilizing this book you can kind of think about, kind of integrate, into these products. Okay, let me just continue on here. This is actually by Caseware. This is a great link to a Caseware, if you go out to their site, who makes IDEA, not ACL, but they have a great kind of a product analysis of picking a software tool. It's a decision analysis. It allows you to kind of, rank things and score things like we've talked about today, so it's kind of interesting. And what I wanted to kind of conclude then on today, and just kind of looking over at the questions, don't see anything unanswered, is really just kind of think about how do we overcome obstacles where continuous monitoring and auditing can be used a lot. I would say, probably one of the biggest, or largest impediments is that people are just too busy these days. So it's something where, data analytics, I have to constantly remind companies, hey, what about those analytics? Or, can we build a little toolkit to run this stuff? And once we build the toolkit, they run it quarterly and they like it, and there's always like a good thing about it. But it is almost like getting them to that point of building the toolkit. I do find it gets there by thinking more about how we're going to use analytics in every audit. So it's something where you're really kind of putting a lot of your a lot of focus to it, and maybe even having time. Like, one of the things I talked about was looking at general ledger data. A lot of people have come back to me and said, we don't have time to just kind of do a special project called look at the general ledger data. It's not in our audit plan. Maybe you could drop an audit and do it. I think you'll learn more from that general ledger analysis than you will an audit of your Manila facility or something. I mean, there's always like something you'll miss, but I do feel like you can kind of drop off a couple of smaller locations that you may not need as much, and then learn from the general ledger analysis. I have seen some companies start to make it part of their annual objectives, like if you have to use it. So that's kind of interesting. I think, some of the other obstacles, whenever I found a lot of money using the tool, the technology, the continuous monitoring, the people, they all showed up. When I was kind of talking about a travel and entertainment invoice that was $75 and happened once, and it was a real issue, but it was sort of like a small issue. It never really got a lot of attention, or the company didn't really grasp it that aggressively. But if I found $1 million, $5 million, some cases I found over $100 million in some of these data runs. That's where people really start to say, we need to track this stuff, we need to promote it more throughout the organization, and hence, pay for the technology. I think planning on education, it's good you're coming out today. I think, having companies just sit down on a web call once every few weeks to talk about analytics. I talk about this coaching in a way of just saying, like, sometimes you just need someone to like a workout coach to say, hey, let's get on a phone call once every few weeks and see where things go. And I do think that has a lot to do with keeping it sort of in people's mindset. I do think getting a team of champions is great, but I also think kind of getting the toolkit built can even be more powerful than just kind of getting the champions together, because it's something where over time that toolkit can run for your organization past anything that you might be doing. I think getting everyone involved is good. I think meaning to have champions is great, but I think to have the whole audit department even just using pivot tables in Excel because they don't understand ACL, that's okay. But at least to kind of get them into the process and start identifying reports to run and things of that nature, I think that is really helpful. And obviously making it part of the annual audit objectives. Establishing data channels, as we've said over and over, I think of all the obstacles, just kind of getting the data into your data mart so that you can run this thing on a quarterly basis or what have you, I think is still a great way to go. Maybe getting it quarterly, getting it from all locations once a year, is all great. So I'm just going to kind of conclude on this last polling question, and then we have some closing remarks here. So just bear with me as I get this polling question up and running. And we'll just open it up to questions. I mean, feel free to post questions. Now's a great time. What product did we not talk about? ACL IDEA, Excel, or Microsoft SQL? So feel free to, again, post whatever questions you have. We'll be, ending by 1 o'clock for sure. And do have just a few other final slides we can note to you at the end here as well. But if you could vote, most of you have voted really quickly, so thank you. Excuse me. Okay, almost everyone has voted. We have about 98% voted, which is wonderful. Okay, and I think what I'll do, I don't see any questions coming in. We'll obviously kind of keep tracking the questions here. I'm going to just give it another 10 seconds here on the polling question if you could answer that. And share that with everybody. Microsoft SQL is another one. I found that some companies are going to Microsoft SQL. I do find external auditors, a lot of those groups are using SQL these days. It's a good platform. Again, it requires a pretty technical person. I mean, you almost have to have a team of SQL programmers that know Visual Basic and know SQL. But again, it's something of a choice. We're obviously talking about ACL today. So, I think that's where the focus is. And, just kind of noting some final slides here in the last few minutes. We have in the queue, kind of coming up here, sampling in Excel and other simple add-in products on August 13th, followed by ACL Basic and Intermediate Scripting, where we go into much more depth on, how to build the script. And I actually use, quite a bit of that 101 ACL applications in that, and also a couple of other products that I had over the years, like 101. And then we'll be talking about financial statement analysis and journal reviews with Excel, which can be very helpful from an ACL point of view. It's something where it's talking about general ledger auditing kind of, but at a Excel level so everyone can understand it, but yet it's definitely where you can take a lot of these concepts and bring them into ACL. I do find one of the questions that's come in is how will ACL change as companies go to saving data in the cloud? I think ACL, does have this GRC product and kind of putting things in the cloud. Not sure how much companies are putting in the cloud right now from a data point of view. I don't know. I'm not really tracking that as much. I do find them, kind of putting it in lockdown servers, behind their network drives and that kind of thing. That's still viewed as a more secure way to handle it. But I do find that some things are being opened up to the cloud for sure. So yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think there's a whole study there, right, of to be had there of just how much are companies utilizing cloud technology these days for data mining and getting data out to their sales team and other people. I do find the GRC product of ACL, I'm not an expert in it, but it does seem to integrate a lot of those analytics in and present that out to a team, which is quite nice. Audit software videos is something that, ultimately you'll see this video will be out there as like a page that you can get access to in a week's time. And again, give us about 5 to 7 days. We will get you the video page as well as the file page as well as all of that will be in one. The CPE handout as well will also be sent to you at that point. But Audit Software Videos has about 70 hours of ACL and Excel training, and just kind of quickly noting or showing this to you, you do need to either log in if you have an account, but you do need to subscribe, and you can subscribe here. You can kind of join for free, and I believe that kind of brings it up. You can pay for things, but essentially what we've done is we've made the videos for free, so you can access all the videos you want for free. But the data files that go with the videos we are charging a little bit for. But there are 70 hours of them and quite a bit. I'm just kind of going to the learning plan here where, it's quite a bit on, all about ACL, Excel, active data, even a little bit of IDEA. And I have a course in here on Access if you use Microsoft Access, but it is a bit old, so I don't want to, put you down the wrong path there, but because it is a bit old. It is detecting fraud using Microsoft Access, and it's going to come up that I need to log in. So let me kind of bring that back. So with that said, there's a lot there in Audit Software Videos for you to take a look at, a lot of videos that have been kind of chopped down to 5 or 10 minutes. And we do welcome you to also come to more of these webinars where you can get CPE. You can't get CPE for the videos, but you can get CPE in what we're doing today. I do see we see there's some people maybe just missing a polling question or so. If you want to email me, that's fine. With all that said, we do appreciate today. If you have any other questions after the seminar, feel free to email them to me, and I'd be happy to answer, wherever you can on kind of getting your continuous monitoring set up. Jim, I didn't know if you had any final words. I know we're a couple minutes before the end here.
Yeah, Rich, I just wanted to thank you for another great webinar today, and thank everybody for their participation. I also wanted to remind you that AuditNet is releasing a new survey on keyword analytics. This is something that is very, very timely, and it would be used for fraud investigations as well as Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And Rich is assisting with this, as well as Steve Valance. And the two of them are going to be basically taking the results of the survey that we have, and we'll be creating a webinar, and it'll basically be, I believe, either a 1 or 2 hour CPE webinar, Rich?
Yeah, I think we probably should go for 2 hours. I think it's worthy of 2 hours. And yeah, I mean, what we want to do ultimately is a lot of people are doing analysis now of email files and ERP files and et cetera for keywords to kind of see, are words like the word increase revenue, that phrase, are those words being used together? And is it kind of showing a trend towards cooking books or fraud? And similarly for FCPA violations and such. And I did bring up that survey on AuditNet's page here, but you can get to it, I believe, right on this left-hand side here. And we will have, I will try to give away as part of it some ACL scripting as well. So we'll have like a little bit of keyword analytics that you can run with ACL. Try to do it in Excel for some people as well. And yeah, so definitely want to go 2 hours on that one.
Yeah. Now, if anybody is curious about, just doing some research on the topic, what I would suggest you do is go out there and look at, just do a Google search on fraud triangle analytics. It's something that has been out there for a while, and you'll find a lot of references to what Ernst & Young has done, but fraud triangle analytics is really, getting into looking at unstructured data as well as structured data. So, this is something that is very timely, and we're looking for maximum participation on this. So, Rich has shown you some of the what's available out there. So I think it's a very important topic, and I think it's one that we're hoping will get a lot of tread on the road as far as helping auditors use data analytics and incorporating, data analytics into the audit process. So again, thank you, Rich, for a great webinar, and thank you all for joining us. And we are at the 1 o'clock mark, so we're going to sign off now. And remember that you will be getting the survey as we end this webinar. And also you will be getting the link to the recording as well as the CPU certificates sometime probably the end of next week. So thank you, Rich. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.